Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the pioneers of existentialist philosophy, coined the term nausea to describe this general reaction to one's own existential disgust. You can often find yourself looking at your life like an outsider and feel like you're not the one living it. From the start of our lives till adulthood, we sort of go through a designated path made for us. We find ourselves with tons of time and don't have to think about the future just yet. That is, for much later, right? We fill ourselves with this sort of hollow confidence that everything will work out if we just continue on with our lives. But by the time we start graduating either high school, college, or university and start working our first job, we come to the realization that the transformation we thought we would have when we become an adult is just mostly false news. It's funny how I thought a lot of things would change about myself when I suddenly became an adult. But even though our environment changes and our routine changes, we still stay the same self that we've always been. Coming to terms with my own adulthood, I started asking myself, now what do I do? And unfortunately, no one had the answer. I had to decide for myself what I wanted to accomplish and who I wanted to become exactly. And those really aren't easy questions to answer. I think this phase of lostness is common for young people in their 20s just coming into adulthood, where for the first time we are left alone and free of other people's decisions for us. That freedom can become a true burden, and thus some people live a life that is still decided by other people because it's just easier to cope. They decide their life by people's opinions of them and how they compare themselves to others. Anxiety to me represents this feeling of lostness in emotional form. And as an emotion, it weighed heavy on me for a pretty long while. As I usually did before, I tried to ignore it and let the pain pass eventually, but it was very dumb to think that because it always returns. And after that, I tried to find methods to cope with the anxiety, either by distracting myself with social media or empty entertainment, or even busying myself with too much work to think about my anxiety. But that only prolonged the inevitable crisis I had to face within myself. When we shut off this anxiety, we shut off a big part of ourselves as well, because essentially anxiety is a message from our true self to the self that is currently living your life. The message to myself was that I was tired of living this kind of life, and I wanted to live more authentically and be more honest with myself and what I needed. That is why I had to pay great attention to them, asking myself constantly where they come from and of what they reminded me. And so I reoriented my life priorities towards addressing what I really wanted to do. These moments of anxiety called on me to make sense of my life. And I knew that the worst thing to do was to ignore them and continue on living the life that caused these feelings in the first place. I realized that this is life. This is it. Right now. We are already living it, and we will continue to do so. Nothing prepares us for this. There's no dress rehearsal, no school with exams to grade you on, and no one else to give you the answers you need. And life is too brief to not consider how to experience it at its best. After a year of constantly searching within myself, and of course with the help of the ideas from my favorite philosophers, I've started to realize the things most important to me. And it's not much. I want a life rich in experiences, and I want a life rich in relationships. And that's pretty much it. I want to take in all that life has to offer for me and accept it without any judgment, without my ego getting in the way of me trying to get out of my comfort zone and explore new things. I realize that my unique experience of life is something that only I can have, and that essentially no one else can take away from me. Today I find a lot of comforts in these thoughts. I like to think that if I follow what I want to do and take one step in front of the other, I'll find myself where I need to be. But to be honest, I think we never really stop feeling lost. We are constantly exploring and changing ourselves, adapting. We change ourselves constantly to find new ways of living that satisfy us. And to me, that's okay, because it's probably the most natural state of being. Yuval Noah Harari, in his book Homo Deus, wrote, "People are usually afraid of change because they fear the unknown. But the single greatest constant of history is that everything changes." And so, if we get too attached to who we were before, we essentially stop being our true self, because it constantly changes, as does everything else around us. I decided to also embrace the constant change of life and see it as something beautiful instead, something necessary. Our anxiety is essentially a message from us to ourselves to start changing the way we are living our life currently. Although in retrospect, I wish that no one experienced these kinds of feelings, I'm happy and grateful that they happened to me, even if it really wasn't a welcome guest at first. Today I've become a much happier, kinder, and honest version of myself. And I still know that I'm still scratching the surface of myself and will continue to explore it for probably the rest of my life. Anyways, before I go too far, that's really all I wanted to say for this video. My goal with this video was to maybe inspire you to explore your own profound inner life and finally address those questions that have been waiting for you to answer since a long time ago. All throughout our lives, I think it's necessary to explore our own inner self and answer those questions, because the person we spend the most time with is ourselves, and not getting to know the person you'll spend the most time with is kind of stupid, don't you think? Thanks for watching, and see you next time.